Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are live. It is the pre-show for today's Network Plus study group. We've got all Network Plus in this first hour. I'm going to ask you questions, and then the second hour, I'll open up the phone lines as soon as I untangle all of my wires here. So we're about 10 minutes ahead of starting. This is the pre-show. The actual show will look more like this. There you go. It won't look like this. You'll be able to see what's going on. Let's make sure everything is running, though. That's the point of this pre-show. Looks like we're recording down here in my bottom right. We're also recording right here on the streaming box. I have a separate system just for streaming, and that's working. Hello, chat room. See the chat room? Let's pop the chat room out so I can actually see them properly. Let's put them right down here. There we go. Howdy, chat room. Let's put the stream help up so I can monitor that as we do this study group. Hello, Columbus. Which Columbus are you? Are you Columbus, Ohio? Are you Columbus, Georgia? I'm sure there's other Columbus, cities of Columbus in the United States as well, and probably elsewhere. ADC. Okay, Columbus, Ohio. Welcome. Hello, Uber guy. Want to see how this works? So here you are. We're going to do all Q&A. I'll ask you questions. There's even one waiting for you. If you pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA, you'll see the message. I'll talk more about that as we get things going here. Let's make sure I have this. Here we go. There's Ocala. Welcome, Ocala, Florida. Are you east or west of I-75? That's really the question in Ocala, isn't it? Atlanta's here. Yersey is here. Welcome. Let's see how we're doing. Audio is set up. Videos look good. This could probably get started. There we go. That looks good. I think we're in pretty good shape here. Ghana is checking in. New York City, welcome. Good to have you here. Hello, Fredericksburg, Virginia. Jordan. There's a big difference between Fredericksburg and Jordan. St. Augustine, welcome. Brooklyn. Whoop, whoop. We've got all live Q&A on Network Plus today. So if you're tuning in for Network Plus, you are in the right place. Although this could really, if you're just wanting to do Q&A, you're in the right place. We're going to do plenty of this in the next hour, figuring out the details. Atlantic City, welcome. India is here. San Diego is here. New York's checking in. There's Canada. Hello, Toronto. Thank you for being here. I can now tell Mrs. Professor Messer that Canada made it. That's our Canada connection here in the house. California's here. Ottawa, welcome. There's more Canada. So it's finally Canada's checked in strong. Texas. We've got more Virginia. Saudi Arabia is here. Clinton, Tennessee. Slovenia. A lot more international this year for some reason. Not sure. North Dakota, is that international? I think that's domestic. Brazil's here. Tennessee. Australia, welcome. Iowa. India, Oman. Kingston, Jamaica, welcome. More Dallas, more India, more Maryland/DC. It is sort of a Maryland/DC thing, isn't it? Wouldn't that be nice if the ISS was checking into the chat room? We saw it go over last night. So we waved. I don't know if you saw us, but we did see you go over last night. For those of you who don't know this, you can see the International Space Station go over. You just need to get a tracking program that will tell you when it's going to come over. And there's plenty on the internet to do that. And you'll know you can just watch it go across the sky. Coolest thing ever. George is here. Welcome. Germany, Michigan, Nevada, welcome. Yemen is checking in. Greenville, North Carolina. So this pre-show is here for me to make sure I've got everything set up. And I think I do in this case. I'm looking. I've got everything I need next to me. I don't really remember the questions. I wrote them 2 weeks ago. So we'll figure it out for the questions and make sure that as we go through it, we'll know. Have I even got the right one? Let's probably step through this. Yeah, that's the right one. Sometimes I don't even have the right bank of questions up. So that's how it works there. Lima is here. Welcome. Lima, Peru. Alberta, welcome. We have family in Canada, so that's why I mentioned that. Mrs. Professor Messer is an American citizen, but her mother and father are Canadian. So there you go. And she is not a Canadian citizen. So there's a whole thing going on there. There's a whole messed up thing trying to figure that out to have those things there. Hello, Benton, Arkansas. Hello, Toronto. Welcome. Have I ever been hacked? Well, as someone who has worked for a next-generation firewall company as a systems engineer, I have worked with many customers who have been hacked. I myself am fortunate so far. It's one of those things. Have I been hacked? Not so far. Let me fix this. We've got a problematic thing going on there. Let's see if that fixes what we need to do. Let's make all of this. Yes, this is Network Plus. 1001 and 1002 for the A Plus were last week. So we don't have another A Plus until next month, until February. We'll have more A Plus. You can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and know when the next event is going to be. No, it did not work for Sonic Walls. Worked for Palo Alto Networks. So we got to walk in and see crazy stuff. And that was great. That was an amazing job working there. That was it was crazy because we had technology nobody else had. I mean, even now today, Palo Alto Networks has technology nobody else has. But that was remarkable to walk in with some of that technology and watch it do its thing. So interesting. But there were situations there where, it's always a challenge. It's just a race. It's a race to see if you can stay ahead of the bad guys. That's always an issue. Let me make sure we've got things ready here. The streaming looks good. YouTube tells me it's excellent. I know you can't really read that from where you are. Maybe you can, since we're now at 1080p, but right there it says excellent. Stream is healthy. So we're in good shape there. We've got 2 minutes to go until we get this thing started. So get your cold drink, get a comfortable chair, get this thing going. In just a moment, we've got what looks like a good group on the chat. When we go through this first section, I'm, of course, checking the chat as we go. But also in that second hour, when I start taking questions, you're more than welcome to take them or ask them directly in the chat as well. I will open up phone lines, but sometimes we get all chat questions. It just depends on how we're feeling that day for all of those things. We've got about a minute and a half. We'll get things started here. Audio looks good there. Here. Test 2. Test. Yeah, that looks okay. Do we have these live chats every week? Almost every week. You can go to professormesser.com/calendar. The link for the questions is professormesser.com/QA. So you can answer. We will get a little bit more of that. See if our voice holds out for this next couple of hours. There's the Network Plus exam is relatively straightforward. For those of you that have followed me talking about Security Plus, those questions for some reason are just huge on the Security Plus exam. Fortunately, the A Plus and the Network Plus exams, at least currently, are relatively focused. Their questions are relatively straightforward, but you never know. Some of them do get into a lot of detail. We can talk more about that in the second hour if you'd like. Right now, we're coming up on top of the hour, which means we're going to start this thing, assuming I have all my pieces in place. I think we do. I think we're just about ready to get going. Let's do a study group, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2020 Network Plus Study Group from your friends here at Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us again. This is our 1 hour of Q&A where I ask you questions that come directly from the Network Plus exam objectives. And you online, if you're here live, you get to answer them interactively. I'll talk in a moment about how we make all of that magic happen. So stick around for all of that. We'll figure out the details. Whenever we start going through and understanding more about where this content is coming from, it's really important to understand that everything here is coming from the exam objectives. So we'll talk about the exam objectives also in just a bit. If you want to participate, if you are here watching live, you can, of course, participate by going to professormesser.com/QA, and you can participate. There'll be a question even waiting for you right there. So that might help you as well if you're getting into this. You want to figure out, how can I go through this process and figure out those details too? That would be how you do it. Go to professormesser.com/QA. There's also an app you can get. It's the Socrative student app. That student app is one that will ask you for a room name. That's what they call it. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you put that in there absolutely correct. You don't want to mess that one up when you go through all of these pieces. I'm trying to get a couple of things running on my screen over here so that you can also see as I bring this up. This will be important for you to know. We have our first question of the day. So make sure that if you are going to professormesser.com/QA, you should see a question already waiting for you. And that question says, which of the following is most associated with the DSL? Your possible answers are PPPoE, SIP trunking, MPLS, ATM, and DMVPN. Those are your 5 options. We'll come back to that in just a moment. I will tell you about some of the things going on here. Our Q&A is something that we're able to do thanks to your ongoing support. Don't forget about our weekly Network Plus pop quiz questions that you can get on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. We even have Network Plus questions available on Instagram now. So you get a question and you can simply slide to the left and see the answer. Follow us on professormesser.com/Instagram. If you want to help support what we're doing here, because obviously every minute of every video we create is available for you to watch absolutely free, one of the things that you can do to help support us financially without spending any money yourself is, if you're purchasing from Amazon, go to professormesser.com/Amazon first. And that way you get the same low price that you've always gotten on Amazon. They send us a little bit of a commission, so that helps keeps the lights on here. We're going to talk about Network Plus today. Everything we're going to discuss comes from the Network Plus N10-007 exam objectives. That's the version of the exam that's currently available for Network Plus. Make sure that all of your materials say the N10-007. This was an exam that was released on March the 1st of 2018, so you probably have another year and a half or even a little more before this exam goes away. So if you are studying right now for that version of the Network Plus exam, then you're looking at exactly the right exam version. This exam is a 90-minute exam. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer, but there could be as many as 90 questions on there. And it's a combination of multiple choice questions, like the one you just saw, and performance-based questions. We're going to do a performance-based question as we get started here. If you want to get your hands on these objectives, and they're incredibly important, make sure you get them at professormesser.com/objectives. There's a link to CompTIA. Take you right there. Of course, if you want an offline version of this course, I have those for sale. You can find the video, the audio, and the course notes version at professormesser.com/getnetplus, or you can follow the links on the website. This live study group is available for replay on YouTube and from my website if you'd like to watch the video. If you'd like audio versions of this, I have a podcast version of this available. You can simply go to professormesser.com/podcast and either stream it live there, or add this podcast to your podcast listening program. And as soon as I post it, your podcasting program will automatically download it and have it waiting on your mobile device so that you can listen while you're in the car, working out, or anywhere else. If you come back in about a day, you'll also notice there is a timestamp available of the study group. So if you want to jump ahead or jump back or find a specific question, this is an easy way to do it. My marketing manager, Lori, is watching this. Hi, Lori. So she's making timestamps of all of these things. It takes about a day to get that done, but she goes through all of these, and you can go back through any of our study group videos for over a year now, and they all have timestamps on them to help you find what you're looking for. So this is one where we have a question that you can answer right now. See if you're in the right place. Which of the following is most associated with DSL? And as you recall, I said, is it PPPoE? Is it SIP trunking? Is it MPLS? Is it ATM? Or is it DMVPN? And as you can see, 78% of you chose PPPoE. If this looks like a question that looks familiar, it's our study group rewind question. It's a question from last month. So this is one where this really would help to be able to know all you can know about DSL and the things that you would do with DSL. Why would it be PPPoE is the question. And that's because with DSL, there is a technology they use to be able to make these connections called point-to-point protocol over Ethernet. The point-to-point protocol has been around forever. It seems to have been back in the day when we were first getting dial-up lines. PPP was a very common point-to-point protocol that we would use across those links. It didn't have to worry about routing because if you're dial-up, you're dialing a number, it's connecting on the other end, and it's just two modems talking to each other. So there's no routing. There's no complexity there. You're going from point A to point B. There's no other points to go. There's nowhere else you could possibly go. So it really fit dial-up architecture. Well, there are a lot of nice things inside of PPP that allow you to do authentication, allow you to confirm that somebody really is a customer. And so now that has been integrated into DSL. But of course, DSL uses Ethernet. So the protocol has been updated a bit. It's actually PPPoE, PPP over Ethernet. And so when you see DSL, you should automatically think, yeah, that's PPPoE. And 80% of you did remember, or you know, that that is indeed PPPoE. It's not SIP trunking. That's used for voice communication, voice over IP communication. MPLS and ATM are wide area network and local/wide area network technologies. And you have DMVPN, which is a dynamic VPN that's able to connect to and mesh multiple sites together. That would not be most associated with DSL. PPPoE, that most number, most name in that particular question is an important one. You'll see this on and on in the exam. Which of these questions, which of these answers is the best? Which most fits this particular scenario? So there may be multiple answers in the questions that are provided and the answers provided, but only one of them is the best. Only one of them best applies. And in this case, PPPoE best applies. If you answered A, then you got that one absolutely right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the exam will consist of primarily multiple choice questions, just like the one we just did. But there will be a handful of questions at the beginning of your exam that are not multiple choice. In fact, if you're not ready for these, it's going to throw you a bit. So this is pretty important if you're planning to take this exam and you've never taken a CompTIA exam before. The first handful of questions will be what CompTIA calls performance-based questions. These are questions that are not multiple choice. They're anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be a matching question. It might be a drag and drop. You might have to put things in a particular order. You never know exactly what the questions are going to be, but they do apply to the Network Plus exam objectives. So there's not going to be a big difference. You're not going to be thrown by the content. Just be ready that the question is not going to be multiple choice, because if you're not ready for that, that could be an issue. Now, the first question I have for you, this one is going to be a fill in the blank question. So hopefully you'll be able to fill in the blank with these. I think you'll be able to figure out most of these. So let's do our first question. Our first new question of the day, of the year, is going to be this question that is a fill in the blank question, which is a specify the OSI layer. So I'm looking for the OSI layer for these 5 items. The first item is traffic sent over TCP 443. The second item is a Category 6 cable. The third item is web server. The fourth item is a bunch of letters and numbers. So I'll spell this out for those of you that are listening on the podcast. The fourth item is 000177 6 Bravo Alpha Charlie 23. And then the fifth item is 192.168.1.1. Now, each one of these is associated with an OSI layer. So I want you to associate each one of these with which OSI layer it might happen to be for all 5 of these. So there's 2 things you have to know here. First, of course, you have to know what all these layers happen to be. What are we talking about when we say an OSI layer? Hopefully that will help you. And then you have to know how these fit. Now, if you think you know the answer, the way that you will answer is you will go to professormesser.com/QA. That is your answer point. Please don't answer in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. We're going to pretend that we're taking this exam for the very first time. We're sitting down. We don't have access to Google. Stop Googling. We don't have access to a chat room. We don't have access to any resources. We're really asking for the OSI layer. So hopefully this is something that can help you as you go through this, trying to figure out, you know, the OSI layers, you're familiar with the OSI layers, be able to add the OSI layers right into this list of things. Hopefully you know what this, when I say specify the OSI layer, what that means. This would be easy to put in. You'll notice in Socrative, it is a fill-in-the-blank question. So this is one where I'm not giving you matching. I'm not giving you any options. And sometimes on the exam, that's what you might get. You might not be able to see what possibilities are. So the question in the chat room, people, how do you know what if your answers are correct if you can't see them? Well, you will have to remember what you typed in. Socrative does not show you what you typed in as the answer, so you will have to remember that as we go through it. That won't be so hard, I'm sure. You'll be able to figure out the details of this. OSI is one of those things that if you've never worked with it before, it seems like it's something that is just too esoteric to be able to wrap your arms around. But you'll notice in the industry, we use this all the time. It's something that we constantly use as we're describing different technologies to other people. So that's why if you're wondering how in the world am I going to become familiar with this, it just becomes part of what you do. So that's why as we go through all of this, you'll have to start figuring out, is this what we're going to go through? Is this what we're going to work through? You'll know immediately what it happens to be. Let's see if we can answer some of these questions. Let's go through each one of these, all 5 of specifying the OSI layer. So the first one on our list was traffic sent over TCP 443. So already in the OSI model, you should be thinking about where TCP fits in the OSI model and being able to use that. And if you do, you'll know that fits at OSI layer 4. So anytime you see anything related to TCP or UDP, for those back in the day, I guess it would be SPX, but we only have to know about UDP and TCP these days, is layer 4. So if you answered layer 4 for that first one, that would be exactly the right answer. The second one is a category 6 cable. Where does a cable fit in the OSI layer? Technically speaking, a cable really doesn't fit in the OSI layer, but we tend to put it into layer 1 because that's the layer dealing with signals. We're talking about getting the signal from one side of the network to the other. What that signal consists of, we don't know yet. We're not high enough in the OSI model to know. But if we're worried that the signal is degrading, if we're worried that the signal is being corrupted and the signal is not able to make it from one side to the other, then we have a layer 1 problem, and often replacing the cable is going to solve that particular layer 1 problem. Our third on our list was a web server. Anytime you deal with anything that you can see, any type of application that is working, then you're dealing with the application layer at layer 7. So anything that's a web server, a file server, some type of server that's providing a service to you and you're able to see this service with your eyes, you can automatically put that into layer 7, the application layer. Now, these next 2 are just letters and numbers. So I mentioned this fourth option is 000177 6 Bravo Alpha Charlie 23. So for those of you familiar, that's a MAC address. So if you're on an Ethernet network, a MAC address fits perfectly into OSI layer 2, the data link layer. That is a data link control address, a DLC address. It's another way that people reference that layer 2 address. On Ethernet, that data link address is a MAC address, and that's why I put the MAC address there. So if you answered layer 2, that's absolutely correct. And the last one, 192.168.1.1, that's obviously an IP address. That is a network address, fits at the network layer of the OSI model, and the network address fits at layer 3. So if you're trying to figure out in the OSI model where all of these different things fit, that is exactly where they would all go. There's obviously other layers in the middle here we didn't even talk about. So if you're trying to figure out more about the OSI model, you want more information about the OSI model, you want to test yourself further, in the N10-007 exam objectives, it's section 1.2, and my video is Understanding the OSI Model. Always put right there at the bottom that where that comes from, so you can find exactly what video that particular question came from, and that might help you to be able to do that. So hopefully that can help you too. The OSI model is one you're going to be using a lot as you work through networking and technology in general. It's a great way to have a way to talk to other people in a format that they can understand. And we just use it constantly in IT. It's something that's going to be important for you as well. There are other models. People in the chat room mentioning, yes, but there's a TCP/IP model. Nobody uses it. In fact, you'll notice CompTIA doesn't even test you on it. It's never used. I think the only time I've ever seen the TCP/IP model is in books that explain to you what the TCP/IP model is. We don't use it anywhere else, it seems. So that's one of those situations. Let's shift gears now and go back to a multiple choice question. I have a multiple choice question for you. This one might help you as you're going through and figuring this out. No more fill in the blanks. This multiple choice question asks, a company has just received a used switch that was purchased from a third party. Which of the following should be performed first during the installation process? You have a number of options available. The first option is generate new keys. Second is modify the management IP address. The third is to document each interface in the configuration. The fourth is to configure radius authentication. And the last is to disable unused interfaces. So there's one. You've got 5 of these to work through. The question again is, a company has just received a used switch that was purchased from a third party. Which of the following should be performed first during the installation process? Would that be generate new keys, modify the management IP address, document each interface in the configuration, configure radius authentication, or disable unused interfaces? If you think you know the answer, please do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and answer the question. Lock in your answer right there. Folks in the chat room, going back to the OSI model and how there's also the TCP/IP model. Yes, you'll find Cisco will still talk to you about the TCP/IP model. People in the chat room saying Google IT support certification expects you to know the TCP/IP model. Those are the 2 places I think that you'll ever see them. So you will see in many books they talk about the IP model. In fact, earlier CompTIA exams talked about the TCP/IP model. They finally took it out because even they realized nobody's using this. Nobody's using that as a reference point in their conversations. Nobody goes back to the IP model to do that. Everybody uses the OSI model. Is the TCP/IP model a little bit more accurate to how we do things? Well, it's a model. It doesn't necessarily deal with the intricacies of technology. It's not as if the model itself is one that you could pinpoint to any specific technology. That's not what they're designed to do. So in fact, when the chat room people are saying, doesn't the session layer involve port numbers? Well, I would think anything from layer 4 up would involve a port number. But when you're talking about the OSI model, you're talking about what layer is that particular object associated with, and port numbers and TCP and UDP are always associated with layer 4. That transport layer. So that's one. Other people are asking, in those questions where there are multiple answers and you could get some of them right and some of them wrong, do you get partial credit? And there's a situation where you might get partial credit. CompTIA said on some of these questions, we might give you partial credit. On some of these questions, we might not give you partial credit. So we never know exactly how that's going to go when we're working through partial credit. You just don't know. CompTIA doesn't say. I'm not even sure why they said we might. That doesn't help either. We just never know. So it's one of those, don't worry about it. Just do the best you can on the exam, and I think you'll be okay. Let's see how we did with this one. The question was that a company has just received a used switch that was purchased from a third party. Which of the following should be performed first during the installation process? Is it generate new keys, modify the management IP address, document each interface in the configuration, configure radius authentication, or disable unused interfaces? And we're a little torn. We did not get a majority on this one. 43% of us said you modify the management IP address. 21% of you said you generate new keys. And then effectively a tie for third for documenting each interface in the configuration, configuring radius authentication, and disabling unused interfaces. Whenever you get a device that has come from someone else, you immediately need to worry about that third party having some type of access to this system. You're now bringing this into your house. It's in your data center. You don't want other people having the ability to authenticate or gain access to this system. So one of the first things you would ever do is you effectively wipe the device. And if you're not able to wipe the device, you remove all possibilities for someone being able to authenticate to that device. And in the device, especially something like a switch, a router, a firewall, or any infrastructure device, you're going to want to generate some new keys. Those keys are used for authentication. So if somebody is needing to use a web browser front end to be able to connect to this device, then there is a certificate, a set of keys on that device that allows that encryption. If somebody's going to SSH into this device to be able to access it at the command line, there are going to be encryption keys used for that communication. So one of the things that's going to be really important is you make sure that the keys have been completely changed. If somebody knows these keys, if somebody has access to these private keys, they could effectively get in the middle of this conversation to either see the information that's there or modify the information that is being sent back and forth over these connections, or ultimately even gain access to these systems. So one of the first things is you nuke the device, you make sure all the keys are brand new, or you use keys that you're using inside of your own organization that you know are safe, and that's what you would apply to this device. I think that's the right answer for this one. Let's step through the other answers to see if those might fit better, because we want to know what we would do first during this installation process. I said it should be generate new keys. Under B, it's modify the management IP address. That is obviously something you will need to do before you plug this into your network, but that's not the most important. There's no security aspect to changing the IP address. That's simply the way you would access this device. And modifying the management IP address doesn't really, since it's not providing a security function, I would put that as maybe a secondary piece that you would need to know. It's probably later on. This is something you would do because you're normally connecting these devices over a serial connection, over a management interface, because you have no idea what the IP address is of this device that you got from a third party. Hopefully that's something that can be useful to you as well. Also, things that you're probably going to do, but later on in the installation process, is to document each interface in the configuration. If this switch did come from a third party, it could have their old configuration on it. Why would you need to document their configuration? You're going to change all of this anyway. So documentation of each interface in the configuration might be something that you do after the fact, once you have it set up on your network. Configuring radius authentication will be something you do also on this device. It certainly helps if you have a centralized device where people are authenticating using a username and password that is stored on a centralized authentication server, such as a radius server. That's not the first thing you're going to do, because you don't even have IP addresses set up on this thing first and have it in there. So that is where you would go to be able to have this here. And the last one, disable unused interfaces. Again, that's a situation where you've already gotten into the system, you're already configuring it. Before you even get to the point where you're enabling or disabling interfaces, you want to make sure you're generating new keys. Now, one of the great things on this question, and people brought this up in the chat room already, is that there are other things I would do before this. For example, I've already mentioned in my description of this, wouldn't we be deleting everything and putting our own firmware or a new version of firmware on the system and completely removing it? That probably would be the very first thing you do, but I intentionally did not put this in here. And the question is not asking you, what is the first thing that you would ever do to this switch? The question very specifically asks, which of the following should be performed first during the installation process and gives you these 5 options. In fact, this may be a situation where you don't have firmware available, you don't have the ability to delete, maybe you don't have access to documentation, you aren't sure exactly how this system could be completely deleted and restarted. So you only have these 5 options available. But the exam does this a lot, where they're not giving you the thing that you think should be number 1 on the list. They're giving you 5 things, 4 or 5 things, and telling you of these 4 or 5 things, which one is the first one you would do. So that's one that it actually makes you think a little bit more detailed about what do I have currently available in my bag of tricks. I have these 5 things. So of these 5 things, what should it be? There's nothing really tricky about that. They're only giving you a subset. In fact, it's a little bit easier in my mind because here are a subset of things that you would do first. Which of these 5 would you choose? That makes things a little bit easier. It could be a fill in the blank. What would you do first? That one's a tricky one, but this one is very specific to be able to have that here. Just because you are changing firmware or deleting a configuration that may be on the system doesn't necessarily mean that you're also changing out keys. The keys may be kept in a different part of the configuration. It depends on the system that you have and what it is saving and how it configures that firmware. So you can't trust just by upgrading firmware that you're also going to create new keys. In fact, as you get into other infrastructure devices, as you're configuring switches, firewalls, routers, you'll notice that the first thing you do during the startup with some of these, it even tells you, let's create some new keys right now. And you go through the process of creating new keys. In fact, there may be a situation, as I mentioned, you're not deleting everything on this box. You need to keep it there. You just need to make it safe for you. So another good example of where creating the keys would be the first thing, or changing or modifying those keys would be the first thing you do to have that there. If you answered A, generate new keys, 25% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another question. Here's one that would be another multiple choice question coming at you. This question asks, a network engineer believes that a 100-meter network run inside a conduit was damaged during construction. Which of the following would determine the distance to any cable fault? Would it be an inductive probe? Would it be a punch-down tool? Would it be a tone generator? Would it be a multimeter? Would it be a TDR? So this question again is, a network engineer believes that a 100-meter network run inside a conduit was damaged during construction. Which of the following would determine the distance to any cable fault? And your options are inductive probe, punch-down tool, tone generator, multimeter, and TDR. Those are your 5 options. If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. We often forget that there's an important part of networking that is the devices, the components themselves that are sending these signals. So that's the part that becomes very, very important, is if you don't have a good foundation, then you're in pretty big trouble whenever you're working through this. So knowing about cable faults, even knowing about construction and conduits becomes pretty important. So hopefully that is something that can help you too. As you're going through this, you have to have the right tools available. You should have a nice tool set as a network engineer, and you need to have probably all of these things, of course, would be in your tool set. All 5 of these answers on here, by the way, are actual tools that should be in your toolbox. So the real question is, what do you grab? What do you pull that out and have a look at? That is the important part. Yes, in the chat room, Wade has cracked the code. Each one of my courses has a theme, and the theme for my networking courses is bridges. So you'll notice every time you see a picture that's on Network Plus, it's a bridge. It's a bridge. And there's probably more obvious on Security Plus. For A+, not as obvious. So that's another one that is not quite as obvious on A+, what that one is about. We can talk about in the after show if you want to know more about how the weirdness works inside of my brain. That may be enough. It's not trains, nope, but you're close with that. And it's not always trains either. There's always sometimes other things there We'll have to figure that out as we go through it. Let's see how you did with this one. Which tool in your toolbox did you pull out to be able to solve this problem? The question again is that a network engineer believes that a 100-meter network run inside a conduit was damaged during construction. Which of the following would determine the distance to any cable fault? The answer was inductive probe, punch-down tool, tone generator, multimeter, or TDR. Which one would we choose? A majority of you, 61% of you, say that it is TDR. TDR stands for Time Domain Reflectometer. And that is the right tool that you would use. 21% of you said it would be a tone generator. 10% of you said an inductive probe. Those two things actually work together. 3% said punch-down tool. 5% said multimeter. So nobody thought it was a punch-down tool. Hardly anybody thought it was a multimeter. We really focused on TDR with this. Now, why would it be a time domain reflectometer, TDR, if you're working with fiber? In this case, I said a 100-meter network run. So we were just assuming that it was copper. I guess this could have been fiber, but we didn't put that as an option. If it was fiber that we need to test, it was the optical TDR, an optical time domain reflectometer. And the real thing we wanted to know is we think in this cable run, there was a break. So maybe it's underground. Where do we start digging to be able to repair a break if that's what we need to do? Now, if it's a 100-meter run, we probably just run a new cable. That wasn't the question. The question wanted to know, where's the break? Do we even have to dig? Do we even have to, maybe it's closer to one side or another to be able to see this? TDRs are great because you can plug them into a network connection, put the TDR on one side, and usually there's a little probe. Here's an example of one in this picture that you plug into the other side. And the time domain reflectometer sends a signal and gets a reflection back. And by calculating how long it took to get a reflection back, it's able to estimate how long that cable is. So if you're trying to figure out where's the other end of this cable, I think it's here. Let's plug both these sides in. We will tone it out and find both ends of the cable. We'll plug this in. How long is that cable? You click a button. It says 88 meters. It will tell you exactly how long the cable is, like it's magic. If there are splices or breaks in the cable, we get a stronger reflection back. And the TDR is able to tell you, whoa, there's a problem or a splice or a break this far down the cable line. And it tells you exactly how far you should go down that cable to be able to find where that problem happens to be. Usually these problems on a cable are something you can't even see. They're inside the cable where there's been a problem. So being able to have this device automatically tell you where it happens to be can be really useful. It'll tell you information about the cable itself, such as impedance information. It will tell you how much of the signal is lost that you're sending across the cable and getting that reflection back. It'll tell you just how much to be able to do those. And it can certify the installation. Is this cable something that can really run Ethernet? It will test that cable and tell you this will handle Ethernet signals on this particular cable. And as I mentioned, finding copper breaks or fiber breaks, simple if you have a TDR or an OTDR, depending on which one of those you're working with. So those of you that answered E, TDR, time domain reflectometer, that is the right answer. Now, why would it not be a tone generator or an inductive probe? Those two things are handled together. I don't have my tone generator up here right now to be able to show you this. But the tone generator is useful because it's able to put a tone on a wire on one end and then use an inductive probe. Usually there's a bundle of cables where you think it happens to be. You simply tap the cables until you find the signal that is the strongest and you know that you found the other end of the cable. That's whenever we talk about toning out a cable, that's what we're really trying to do, is find both ends of it. That's all it does for you. It doesn't tell you if it's wired properly. It doesn't tell you if one of those wires has a break anywhere in the middle, because it's able to send that tone through all 8 of those wires. As long as one of those wires makes it to the other end, we're able to find the end of it. Tone generator won't tell you the distance that there may be a problem. It won't even tell you if there is a problem to be able to do that. So that's one where it may be easy. Now, in this case, I mentioned if you've only got 100 meters and it's copper and the conduit is an issue. You may have to replace the conduit. Maybe you're trying to figure out where in the conduit do we have a problem so that we can then tell the conduit guys to fix the conduit 66 meters down the line, because our TDR told us the cable was broken 66 meters down there. Once you fix the conduit, we can run new cable through there. You obviously don't want to splice or put anything in the middle that may limit the signal through those links, especially in a cable run in the middle of a conduit. It should be a single piece of copper in there with no possibility that there would ever be corrosion, that it would ever disconnect. What a mess that would be. Always put a single run through a conduit to be able to do that. So hopefully you've got an idea now of the type of questions that you might see on the Network Plus exam. The exam, of course, is huge. It's an enormous exam to be able to work through. There are questions about fiber and copper and encryption and security and proxies and topologies and protocols and port numbers and on and on and on. The exam objectives are huge, and you will be expected to know everything on those exam objectives. What I've done is go through every single one of my videos. I've taken all of the text, all of the graphics that are important to see, all of the charts that I've created, and I put them into one single book. This is my course notes that you can get in a digital format or a physical format. Here's the digital format of the course notes book. I've got it here on my screen. 66 pages long, goes through every single topic from the exam objectives. And here is the information that you would normally see. All of the port numbers, the OSI models, the topologies, everything that you would expect to have in a set of notes if you made them yourself. This is something instead I've taken all of this and put them into this full color set of course notes. The course notes themselves are available for $20 in this digital form. You can also get a physical version of this. It's a little more expensive in a physical form because we have to print it out and bind it in this perfect binding. It's got a nice softback binding, full color, nice high quality pages in here. It is one that has exactly the same content as the digital edition, but it's in a physical book. Some people like a physical version of this. And if you buy the physical version, you also get the digital version for free. So while you're waiting to get this shipped to you, you'll have the digital version available that you can work through. If you want to find out more information on this, you can find it at professormesser.com/NPCN. Maybe this will save you a lot of time. Maybe it will be one that can help you get exactly the content you need to study for your exam. And if we are shipping the physical version to you, we usually ship it out. It's printed on demand. So it's something you're getting, one that was made just for you, that I'm shipping in the domestic and the continental U.S. It usually takes about a week, plus or minus a few days, to be able to get that to you, depending on if it's a weekend, and all of those things apply. But usually you'll have it in just about a week. International obviously takes about 3 times that amount of time to get it to you. International is a completely different animal, but we ship anywhere in the world. You can see all of that at professormesser.com/NPCN. Thanks for your support, by the way. Every penny that you spend towards this goes back to keeping this craziness going. So we really do appreciate your support there. Let's see if we can do another question. I've got one for you. Oh, an IP question. You've been asking for more of these, so here's one for you. When you start your process of subnetting, this is where you may begin this process that asks, what default subnet class is associated with 156.250.192? I guess you have a .1 at the end. I did not type in the .1. It's not on the answers either. We're going to do this live and in real time. See, you're wondering, why does that IP address look so weird? Isn't there supposed to be another octet at the end of this? There is. So we just added one. There you go. How much better is that? 156.250.192.1. Obviously, it doesn't have the 192.1 online. When you go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer, there's always a typo somewhere. We found this one, didn't we? That one was relatively obvious. I'm not perfect when it comes to these, but hopefully we can correct it on the fly. We'll fix it in post. We will not fix it in post. We'll just keep this one in there. 156.250.192.1. What is the default subnet class for that particular IP address? We were having a discussion about subnet classes on Reddit earlier this week. Well, I think it was Reddit, may have been the Discord for the CompTIA subreddit. We were talking about subnet classes and why we have subnetting set up this way and why we have classes. And we don't use subnet classes anymore. It used to be an automated way to figure out subnet masks. And we just don't use them anymore because we have other ways to do it, which you probably know about since you've watched the videos on subnetting. But there's so many different ways to go through a subnetting process. So whenever I work through the subnetting, and you go from knowing what the classes are to working with classless subnetting to understanding the CIDR block notation to understanding the binary math behind the scenes, at that point, a lot of people make a jump after that to be able to understand, where do I go from here? How do I find the best way to subnet that works for me? Now, in my videos, I have the 7-second subnetting. There's a lot of other ways you can subnet, the shortcuts for subnetting. I think that most people end up using those shortcuts. But to be able to use those shortcuts, a lot of questions will say, knowing the default subnet for 156.250.192.1, calculate this ending subnet. So we have to know what these default classes are because sometimes we're asked about them. That's why this particular subnet question was put in here. Let's see how you did with this one. What default subnet class is associated with 156.250.192.1? Stuck the .1 at the end. Do it in your head. And you can see that 70% of you, a pretty good majority, said class B. 15% of you said, nope, that's a class C address. And then it's a tie for third between class A and class D. 0% say class E. Why is that? Nobody said class E? That's the one I would have chosen. We don't see much class E, do we? Now, why is that? Let's talk about this. The thing that's most important when we're looking at an IP address and trying to figure out the class is that first octet. Technically, it's the first few bits, not couple, but the first few bits that are in here, the first 4 specifically. On those bits, 156, where does it fit? Well, I have a chart, of course, in my videos that describes all the different classes and what those leading binary bits would be right at the beginning. Now, fortunately, those fit into a particular range. So the one we were dealing with was an IP address that started with 156. So all we have to do is go through this list and we can see, is 156 between 1 and 126? No. Is 156 between 128 and 191? Yes, it is. That's class B address. That's how we figure those things out. Now, there's some other math on here if you wanted to see the default subnetting for these, how the default networks, hosts, and default subnet masks would be. Those are in here as well. You'll notice I don't have 127. We skipped from 126 to 128. Technically 127, I think, fits into that class A. But 127, everything that starts with 127 is a reserved address. It's a loopback address. You won't see that used as an end address on a device. It won't be assigned to a particular address interface. I would imagine most devices would not allow you to assign a 127 dot address to anything. So I don't put it necessarily in here. I probably should stick it in class A because binary math tells us that's a class A address. But I do make the point down here. Yep, that's loopback. Class E, by the way, which nobody said, that's a reserved class. In the standard for IP, the idea is that particular range of IP addresses from 240 to 254 would be reserved for either something in the future or something you might do in your lab. The reality is we're using our private IP addresses for almost all of that these days. Class E just never gets used. It's never seen, not something we would ever work with. So if we look at our IP address, we already mentioned class B would be the right answer. And in fact, 70% of you have already said class B. Yep, that's what we think it is as well. You are absolutely right. What you always have to do is look at that first octet, figure out from your memorization of that chart and being able to work through there what class that happens to be, and you would know it. Now, in the chat room, people are saying, why would people use class A with a class C subnet? Well, there is no such thing. We don't use classes to be able to do this. Back in the day, the reason we created these classes of IP addresses originally is we wanted the subnet mask to be something set automatically. So if a device was configured with an IP address of 10.10.10.1, the device would automatically figure out, based on the number of leading bits, that is a class A address. I will automatically default to a subnet mask of 255.0.0.0. That's it. That's your subnet mask for class A. Yeah, but I'd like to subnet that. We didn't have subnetting. There was no subnetting. There was no changing of these. It was written in stone that if you were a 192.168.1.1, your subnet mask was automatically 255.255.255.0. That was it. You can imagine having such structure limited the number of addresses we could use, because with Class A, you could have 16 million devices on a single network. Nobody has 16 million devices on a single network, which meant you had a huge amount of wasted space. And that's why we decided maybe we should come off this class-based subnetting, and we should decide our own subnet mask. It doesn't matter what the IP address of it happens to be. We would like to be able to use something that was a little bit smaller number of hosts per subnet. And that's why we came up with this idea of a classless subnet masking. Some people refer to this as variable length subnet masking. I guess technically that is correct. That's what Cisco calls it. Therefore, that's what everyone calls it. That's not really what it is, but it's classless-based subnet masking, that variable length subnet mask. Being able for you to decide what that subnet mask is, but you need a starting point. And the starting point is these classes. And that's why we have that there. So it makes sense to me. Hopefully it's one that makes sense to you. As you go through subnetting, you'll eventually see these addresses, and you'll see this confuses many people that says, wait, you have a 10-dot network that has a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask. That's not jiving. That's not the right subnet for that class. Yep, we don't use classes anymore. We haven't since the 80s. So that's one where it's not going to be a big deal for you. Make it whatever you'd like. Make it what makes sense for you. And I think in most networks I've ever run into where you have a corporate network, if you go into, I would say the vast majority, over 90% of the customers I would walk into were customers using the 10-dot network as their private network, and they were almost always subnetting it to 255.255.255.0. It made it so simple. You had so much room for networks. You had the perfect size for subnet. It was very easy to subnet it that way. You could do it in your head. You wouldn't need a chart. You wouldn't need a spreadsheet to figure it out. You don't need a calculator. It can easily be done in your head. And it also allowed them to arrange things in a way that made sense for what they were doing. That's what most people will do. So hopefully that's what you'll run into on your network to be able to do that. Let's do another question. I've talked long enough about subnetting. Let's keep moving. And the next question asks, which of the following would best describe a wireless access point, or a WAP? W-A-P. Which of the following would best describe a WAP? Would it be a router, a firewall, a bridge, a VoIP endpoint, or a modem? Those are your 5 options. That's all you get. A router, a firewall, a bridge, a VoIP endpoint, or a modem. If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. Please no answering in the chat room. We want to figure out what that happens to be. All of those things, of course, are real things. The router, the firewall, the bridge, the VoIP endpoint, and the modem. All things you do need to understand. If you're looking at one of those and wondering, what does that do actually? Make a note of that. You need to go back and have a look at what all of these different technologies are and where they might fit into your infrastructure. That might help you as well as you're going through this. Whenever I start trying to figure out and breaking this down, it might help you if you start looking at what things you know it is not. So sometimes the calculatus eliminatus helps you a little bit, where you can get rid of, well, I know it's not this, and I know it's not that. Well, now I'm down to 3 options. So that might help you as you go through this. It's another thing I often mention as you're working on the actual exam. If your time is running out, go ahead and answer the other questions. Put something in. If you have time to read the question, make an educated guess. If you have no time to read the questions, just answer A on every single one of them, and maybe you'll hit. But always answer every question on your exam. The one thing we do know about the exam is that you don't get any points if you don't answer. You also don't get any points if you get it wrong. They don't take points away. You aren't penalized for getting a question wrong, so it doesn't hurt to guess. The only thing that could possibly help you is that you might get actual points. You might luck out and get a question right, and you get free points. So you can't be hurt by doing that. So make sure you go through these. Let's see how we answered this one. Which of the following would best describe a wireless access point, a WAP? It's a great name, isn't it? 53% of you said that's a router. 38% of you said, nope, that's a bridge. 8% of you said, nope, that's a modem. And then 0% said firewall, and 0% said VoIP endpoint. Well, that's a pretty strong one. We went from router to bridge to modem to nothing pretty quick on these. So let's talk about a wireless access point. When we talk about a access point, we are not talking about the wireless router that you might have at home. Those all-in-one devices you have at home are a combination of many different things squished into one box. Those devices are switches, routers, bridges. They are wireless access points. They're firewalls. They might have URL filters inside of them. They might have VPN technology inside of them as a VPN endpoint. They might do they might have all kinds of different functionality inside of it. Those are 7 things right there that are very common to find in many people's small office or home office devices. But they are in and of themselves this multifunction device. This question really asked for a very specific technology, a wireless access point. The wireless part of a wireless access point is responsible for taking information on an Ethernet network and putting it onto a wireless network, or taking information from a wireless network and putting it onto an Ethernet network, or having 2 people on a wireless network communicate to each other through this wireless access point. The process of doing that is actually bridging. That's where it is making a decision. That wireless access point is making a forwarding decision based on the destination MAC address that's going through the device. And as people are communicating to the device, it looks to see where's the destination of this. If I know where the destination is, I'll send it down its way. If I don't, I'll send it to every interface that I happen to have on here. A wireless access point, it's a layer 2 device. OSI layer 2, it's a bridge. It operates at the MAC address level. So if you're ever installing a WAP, if you're ever working through a wireless access point, that is what we are working through. We're looking at a bridge. Now, specifically, a bridge can communicate at this level. You'll also see bridges communicate and allow you to transfer information between different topologies. So that's another common use of a bridge, is to be able to do that, is that we go from wireless to Ethernet and Ethernet to wireless. Those are 2 very similar topologies in their structure, in their frame, but obviously very different in how they communicate, one over copper, one over the airwaves. So very different. Now, we call this a bridge, but of course today we have many devices that operate and make forwarding decisions based on layer 2 of the frame, and those devices would be switches. A switch is also a bridge. Before we had switches, we called them bridges, by the way. When we finally came up with this newer technology, because bridges and how they used to operate would all be in software. And then somebody came up with a way to take all of that software, everything we were doing in software, let's put it in hardware. So it was able to do this bridging very, very fast because now it's in hardware. And because it's in hardware, we used to have bridges that have 4 interfaces on them. Now we've got bridges that have 24 interfaces on them, 48 interfaces on them, many, many interfaces on them. And we needed a different name for this. It was something well beyond the capabilities of our old bridges. We called those new technologies switches. And so a switch is a bridge and a bridge is a switch, but it really is a difference in how we reference that particular technology. Switch is the modern version of a bridge, but calling a switch a bridge is perfectly reasonable. It is the same thing. So if you did answer bridge, letter C, 39% of you chose bridge. That is the right answer. Why would it not be a router? 53% of you said that's a router. Well, because the wireless access point is not taking information from one IP subnet and forwarding that traffic based on that destination IP address, it doesn't turn into a router. It's not a layer 3 device. It doesn't operate at that layer of the OSI model. So it would not be a router. So you have to remember that that wireless router you have at home is a router, a switch, a WAP, and many other things all built into the same box. In this question, we were very specifically asking just for wireless access point, and that's why it's not a router. That's why it's also not a modem, modulator, demodulator. There's nothing being demodulated here. It's all happening with these digital signals being sent over these wires and over the air. So we're not changing this into some other type of modulation. We're simply turning it from Ethernet to wireless and back again to be able to do that. Does a bridge broadcast to all devices at all times different from a switch? No, it does exactly the same process as a switch does. It interprets and looks at the destination MAC address. It looks at a table inside of its device to determine where should I send all traffic for this destination MAC address and sends it in that direction. Makes the forwarding decisions all based on a destination MAC address. A device that pulls in a frame and doesn't make any forwarding decision based on it, it simply takes that frame and broadcasts it out to every other device, every other interface on that particular device. That's a hub. You shouldn't see any hubs around anymore. We don't have hubs that do. If you do find a hub, it's something that someone's kept in a drawer. They pull out from time to time so they can do some packet analysis of a 100 megabit network. Maybe that would be the only reason you would use a hub these days. You would not see that used anywhere else. They're hard to find now. You don't see hubs anymore. Obviously, hubs are talked about on the exams. Somebody must have one running somewhere, and it is useful to talk about a hub in the history of networking to describe what we used to have and why switches are so much better. So huge differences between a hub and a switch. We got some time to squeeze in another question, so let's do that. Let's go back to our list. Here's the question that asks, a corporate network has lost connectivity to a remote location. Which of these would provide encrypted terminal communication over low bandwidth backup links? Would that be SSH, FTPS, RDP, Telnet, or DTLS? Those are your 5 options. A corporate headquarters has lost connectivity to a remote location. Which of these would provide encrypted terminal communication over low bandwidth backup links? Would it be SSH, FTPS, RDP, Telnet, or DTLS? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Some of you may know this one. I'm not going to take a sneak peek quite yet until we have you go through this and figure out the details. This is one, hopefully, you're not in the situation. Usually, you're having to do this when you lose the connectivity to a remote location. Usually, you're getting that call at 3 in the morning. So that's not something you want to run into either. But usually, you're the one getting that call when it's coming in. So hopefully, you will be the one performing the encrypted terminal communication over low bandwidth backup links, hopefully so you can figure out why you lost the connectivity to begin with. This is a pretty common thing that you're going to be doing in your job. Hopefully, it will not be happening to you a lot. But the more remote locations you have, the more often this thing is going to happen to you, unfortunately. So lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this happens to be, and we will have a look. Now, by the way, if you are watching these videos for continuing education unit credit, you would like to receive an email from me that has been digitally signed and says you must have watched this, then you must follow these instructions to be able to receive that. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link, and in that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. Make sure those are right because I will be emailing this back to you. And in the subject line, please put that this is the January 2020 Network Plus study group. And in the text box or even in the subject line, somewhere in that message, put the super secret password phrase of encrypted. That's what we're going to use. I just pulled it right out of the question. Encrypted. Which of these would provide encrypted terminal communications over low bandwidth backup links? Encrypted is our magic word, our super secret passcode of the month. And send that to me. And then if you can put also anything else in there you would like to. I'm the one reading through these and processing them. So if there's anything else you would like to comment, put. I'm not able to respond to all of them, but I do read through all of them. So you're more than welcome to do that. Follow those instructions. I'll be glad to send that to you and have those there. Let's see how you answered this one. A corporate headquarters has lost connectivity to a remote location. Which of these would provide encrypted terminal communication over low bandwidth backup links? SSH got 63% of the vote. That's a pretty strong vote. We have effectively a 4-way tie for second. FTPS, RDP, Telnet, and DTLS. Sort of a mix between all of those and having them there. So let's go through each one of these. The one that really is right is the one that everybody got. SSH, 64% of you chose SSH. It is a secure communication. It's a console communication. It works at the command line. It doesn't use much bandwidth, so it's perfect for backup links to have this there. It's a really nice protocol to use. In fact, it's the default thing you should be using to communicate over the network to all of your infrastructure devices. You should never be using Telnet. Telnet is a non-encrypted communication. It is in the clear, as we call it in the industry. It's never something you should be using to communicate over your network. You should always be using SSH. Now, in this particular case, you had some other options. FTPS is a way to do a file transfer over secure communication. We don't need to do a file transfer. We need to SSH in and be able to understand why we're not able to communicate to the site. Remote desktop protocol certainly is encrypted and certainly provides remote connectivity, but it's definitely not what I would consider low bandwidth, especially compared to SSH. So RDP, probably not the right answer here either. Too much bandwidth would be used. We probably have a dial-up line or a very slow cellular line to be able to go into this remote site. Telnet, as I mentioned, is in the clear. Not a technology we would use. And DTLS, the datagram transport layer security. DTLS is a technology used on VPNs, really is a mechanism for transporting information, not a mechanism for providing encrypted terminal communication, so that would not be the right answer either to be able to have that there. So of all your possible options, only one really stands out, and the one you would be using is SSH. That is your best option to provide that connectivity. And hopefully you'll be able to SSH in. Maybe that remote site has a cellular connection. They have a dial-up line. You can SSH into that site and figure out why did that link disappear so that you can get back to sleep and continue getting more sleep and be refreshed in the morning and be able to go to work. That's not usually how it works. I'm really just speaking in the best possible terms. Maybe that will work out to be able to have that there. That shouldn't be the case. For those of you that are asking, that the CEUs are absolutely available to use on replays as well, because I'm using this, I'm giving you that special code word. That way I know you're watching all the way through to be able to find the instance, because I don't always do this at the exact same time. So the code words allow a replay to be used as a continuing education unit credit. No problems there. That is the real key. And especially if I'm sending you the certified digitally signed email, and that's something you can use if you ever are audited. It might help you out with that. All the questions today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you have these objectives. So important. And being able to have these objectives here. Notice that they are extremely detailed. I've had people show up in my chat room after they took their test and they said, I didn't do well on my test. I got a lot of questions about things I was not expecting. I said, well, what topics were covered? Well, they asked me about the OSI model. They asked me about a TDR, whatever that is. They asked me about, I said, well, this is in the exam objectives. That's the first thing I ever tell you in my videos is download the exam objectives. I say this every month on the study groups to download the exam objectives. And they said, yeah, I just thought it was a basic overview. I didn't know there was detail in it. So don't make that mistake. Make sure you get this. If you know everything in these exam objectives, you're going to do fine on your exam. That's how detailed they are. So this is a great checklist. If you want to know, am I ready to take this exam? Use this as a checklist. Go through every one of those. You'll know exactly if you're ready to go or not. We do one of these study groups for Network Plus every month. We do other live events every month as well. Last week was our A+ study group. Next week is our Security Plus study group. You're welcome to come back for those. The next Network Plus study group will be in February, on February the 19th. Notice we also have A+ study groups on February the 4th and 6th. We take that second week of the month off, a little bit different than we do in some groups in some months. So make sure you're familiar with that. There's a 19th is our Network Plus study group, and the 26th of February will be our Security Plus. If this is you just forget when it's going to be, or you're watching this video and it's well after February, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and find out when the next event is going to be. So that's an easy way to figure all of this out. Well, we've gone through an hour where I've asked you the questions. Now we're going to turn this around in the after show where you ask me the questions. So I'm going to open up the phone lines. I'm going to take questions from the chat room. We're going to talk about CEUs. We already see questions about that coming in. Don't forget that during the normal time when we are not here doing this live, you've got weekly Network Plus questions being presented to you on Twitter. Go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. We're having a good time on Instagram with the questions there. There's a lot of people on Instagram asking questions and putting comments. You simply slide it and you're able to see it. It's in your Instagram feed. It's a great way to do it. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll have all kinds of things happening there as well at professormesser.com/YouTube. Our Network Plus course notes can be something that might help you save a little bit of time with your studies and really get down some of these topics before you walk into the exam. You can find that at professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes, or find the links on the website. And of course, don't forget about the link on Amazon. If you're an Amazon shopper, be sure to visit professormesser.com/Amazon first and help support the website. Thank you for being here in this first hour. We could not have done this without you. Stick around in the after show. We are going to have Q&A coming the other direction. You're going to ask me questions. We're going to see how this goes. Thanks for being here for this first hour. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Now, I need to get the phone lines up and running. Here we go. There's all it is. Hi, everybody. So now let me open up the phone lines. I don't even think I have the right URL ready to go here, so give me a moment. I have to remember what it is. Normally, I have this all set up. Most of it I have set up. So I'm going to plug in and have my Skype, there it is, all set up to go. And I'm going to start a show. I'm going to host a show. This is a cloud-based call-in system. So I have to call into my own show, and then you can call into my show. Kind of funny how that works, isn't it? So let's call in. It's going to make some beeping noises here. And it asks, yep, I'm going to type in some numbers here.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
That sounds redundant. I say that every time. And if I type that in properly,
welcome.
It says welcome, which means that you are welcome. If you are calling from inside the continental U.S., you can call in at 855-785-RJ45, west of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. This is one where you can call in. I'm also taking questions from the chat room. So if you're not interested in calling, you don't understand why people would communicate via voice, I'm with you. We'll take questions from the chat room as well and go through those. Also, you're able to step through all of this. I have, if you're outside of the continental U.S., you can call in for free. This is a toll-free number, and you can call any toll-free number on Skype for no Skype minutes. So all you have to do is to put a +1 at the beginning with +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in there as well to be able to answer or ask any question you would like. It's free. I pay for the call because it's a toll-free number. That's how that works. Somebody has to pay for it. It's this guy right here, being able to pay for those and have those available. The questions in the chat room were about CEUs. The CEU, excuse me. What happened? I need a drink of something. There we go. It's 1 hour of a webinar category CEU if you are using the CEU for CompTIA. So other organizations will also take CEUs, but it's a 1 hour CEU, regardless of how they categorize it. CompTIA categorizes it as a webinar. So that's where that comes from. So hopefully that answers your question about CEUs. Now, I realize a lot of you are not collecting CEUs anymore. You're simply using the CertMaster CE program to be able to renew your certification in just a few hours. And I have a video that describes how to do that. That is called How to Renew Your Certification in Just a Few Hours. That's literally the title of it. So if you go to the YouTube and search for that, you'll be able to find that video where I describe all of those and have those pieces there. Hopefully that will help you as you go through all of this. I think that's one that would be useful to know as well. Other questions, I'm going to put this. Do I do personal career coaching? I do right now. So if you would like to have some personal career coaching, you can call in to the phone number or send me a chat message. I do not do one-on-one type training. I don't do any one-on-one type coaching. I don't do anything one-on-one. It takes a lot of time just to do this. So if I was talking to other people, I wouldn't have time to do this. So what good with that? What book do I recommend to complement my training? On the Professor Messer website, there is a recommended list. So if you go in the A+, Network Plus, or the Security Plus list there, in that menu selection, there is an option for my recommended study materials. And that will take you to a page that has all of that. In fact, I should just do it on my screen since I'm talking about it. As I am telling you, we could use the magic of technology to be able to show you that under the CompTIA training, Network Plus training, or the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus training, there's for example, Network Plus study recommendations. And if you click on that, it will open up the Network Plus study recommendations page where I have, of course, I always say you get 4 things are important. You need videos, you need a good book, you need lots of Q&A, you need plenty of hands-on. So I have 4 sections here that have my videos, a list of good books, Q&A books, and hands-on labs. So I try to give you a smattering of all of those, and those are available for Network Plus, A+, Security Plus, all on the Professor Messer website. So that's give you a place to go to be able to access what those happen to be. Maybe that can help you as you're trying to figure that out. We do have some callers that are calling in. I'm going to get these phone lines up and running so people can actually hear us when we are talking. Let's go to PC, 850 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor. This is Wade calling from Pensacola, Florida.
Hello, Wade. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I didn't necessarily have a question. I just wanted to thank you for all your help. I had been studying for about 6 months, and I passed my exam in December.
Nice.
Largely in thanks to you. So I just wanted to call and say thanks. And I really appreciate the content that you create.
Congratulations on your certification. Then if you have, we obviously can't talk about specifics on the exam, but if there are certain topics that you think other people should absolutely focus on, what 2 or 3 things would you want to make sure people are thinking about when they walk into their exam?
Yeah. One thing specifically, I would be very comfortable with your command line commands and understanding what they do and what they would help you troubleshoot.
Great.
Another thing, definitely helped to be familiar with subnetting, and your subnetting chart helped a bunch. Specifically like the 7-second subnetting video was a lifesaver, so I really appreciate that. And I mean, nothing else really in particular, just, and you had kind of gone over it earlier, just be familiar with the exam objectives. I had kind of hammered down on those and just made sure that I was very familiar. And if there was anything that I wasn't familiar, if I couldn't tell my girlfriend about one of the topics in the exam objectives, I made sure that's where I needed to study.
Great.
And after doing that, I felt really comfortable, and I went in and I passed, and I felt really good.
Fantastic. What's your next step?
So I'm actually currently studying for Security Plus. I am currently reading a book. I'm basically going to be doing the same thing that I did with the network. I read a book, and then I watched your whole playlist on YouTube, and then just studied the weak points in the exam objectives. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And then I'm not certain after security, potentially a Microsoft cert or maybe a Cisco cert. I haven't really decided yet.
Plenty of time to figure that out.
Something along those lines.
One thing at a time. Security Plus is hard enough to step through that. Well, congratulations on your Network Plus. Best of luck. Maybe we'll see you next week for the Security Plus study group, or at least get you through some of those study groups to have that there. Appreciate the call, Wade. Congratulations.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Professor.
That's always a good suggestion, though, is those exam objectives. I always say it. I feel like I sometimes say it too much, that maybe it just becomes a droning noise after a while. but other people, I think, hearing it from other people should also help, that you need to get those exam objectives. They're so important. Let's go to the 646 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm calling from the Chicago area.
Welcome. What can we do for you?
Hi there. So I just finished my trifecta. I've got A+, Security Plus, Network Plus.
Nice.
And I'm just wondering, what kind of salary could someone reasonably expect with those 3 certificates and no experience?
This is probably one of the top 3 questions I always see online is, all right, let's talk some money. How much is this going to get me? And the answer is it varies widely depending on where you are in the world. It varies widely depending on where you are in the United States. And it varies widely on what employers are looking for. I sometimes have mentioned that the best possible things that you could have on your resume or sort of as you're walking in the door to an interview, there's 4 things you really would hope to have available to show people. One is a formal education of some kind. It can be a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a technology degree, but a formal degree is something that employers are looking for. Whether that's useful or not in the big picture doesn't matter. They're looking for it. So that's why I mention it. The other thing is some type of industry certification. You mentioned A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, perfect examples of things you should walk in the door with a list on your resume that you're able to tell people about. The third thing is some type of experience. And that's the sort of the catch-22 that we always run into is if you've never had a job in technology and somebody wants you to have experience, how are you supposed to get a job in technology? And I've mentioned on other study groups, maybe it's you doing some volunteer work for a nonprofit. Maybe you're somebody who you have some work that you do for a third party where you just keep their systems up to date. You make sure their antivirus has the latest signatures. You make sure their operating systems are running the latest versions. That's practical experience. Whether you're getting paid for it or not is irrelevant. You've put in the time and you understand what's required to do that. That helps you at least have some stories when you walk into an interview, because really what that practical experience is giving you are some stories. You need to have some anecdotes when you walk in that door that you could talk to the person interviewing you and say, here are things that I've done. Here are problems that I ran into when I was doing it. And here's how we solved those problems. That's really what employers are hoping to hear from you, whether it's a practical experience on somebody's network. Worst case, if you don't have that experience, maybe you set up your own lab. You have your own home lab where you're running Linux, you're running Windows, you're connecting them together, you're transferring files, you're setting up some virtual systems where you're running maybe a firewall, you're running some type of a security technology, something where you can explain to a third party, here's what I set up at home to protect my network, and here's what I found when I did it, because you will always find people attacking your network. So here's how many people were attacking my network last week, and here's a report of it. You know, those are things people go, oh, wow, you're really into this technology stuff. You really found people attacking your network. Yeah, it's painfully easy. People don't realize just how easy it is to find people attacking their network. All you need is something that can report in it so you can show other people. And what a great story to tell other people that you're meeting with. The fourth one, and this isn't really something you put on the resume, is hopefully you know somebody who works there. Now, obviously, if you are simply sending out resumes blindly to these companies, that may not be something that you've got in your back pocket. That's why I often tell people, if you are in a geography of the country that allows you to go to a Microsoft user group, a Cisco user group, or any technology user group in general, you will find the people who are working at these companies and you will get to know them. This isn't something you just go to one meeting and suddenly you know everybody who was there. But after a number of months, you see the same people over and over. You get to ask them questions. Oh, where do you work? I've been looking for a help desk position. What does your help desk position look for? You get to ask questions like that so that when you finally get in the door for one of these interviews, you could say, yes, I know Bob in the development department because I know him from the Microsoft user group. And they go, oh, yeah, you know Bob. Okay, great. Having that personal connection is incredibly valuable. They know you through someone else. It's that degrees of separation type thing. And in the world of hiring people where it's always a mystery when the person walking in, where one of the big questions that the employer has is, if they're qualified, are they going to flake out and leave after 2 weeks and I'm just going to have to do this all over again? Is this somebody who's going to show up on time and work hard throughout the day and do what they're supposed to do? Are they going to be a problem once they get here? These are all worries that employers have. Oh, you know, Bob. Well, I'm going to go talk to Bob after we're done here. You can probably already tell Bob, hey, I'm coming in to interview. If they talk to you, you'll let them, that's what that's about, if they contact you. And that way, now there's a personal connection. They go, okay, we can hire him, and we kind of got rid of a lot of the worries. Now we can concentrate on what this person happens to know and if they're qualified for the position. It's a very powerful, that fourth one, pretty powerful. Don't discount it, and it should fit into your job hunting strategy. If you're someone who's listening, and not just you, but anybody who is on this live stream,
right,
and you're just blindly sending out resumes, you could be doing more than that. There are other things you can do to help improve the performance of these things that you're sending out. And by the way, that's where in the user group, people often ask you for the resume, because it turns out if Bob gives your resume to HR, that Bob gets a finder's fee if you get hired. So there may be a financial benefit to Bob recommending you for a job in these companies that you would have never known about had you not just attended a user group meeting, which, by the way, usually has pretty good content. You actually learn something when you're there anyway. So there's plenty of things you can do to help along those lines. Even though you may not have that formal degree, there may not be that college piece on your resume. There are ways to change the weighting and maybe help you a little bit depending on what an employer may be looking for.
Okay. All right. Thanks a bunch.
I appreciate the call. That's one that might help anybody, really. If you're, I get these all the time where people say, I've sent out 100 resumes. I'm just not getting a response back. Well, all they know about you is the resume. What are other ways? Do you have a good LinkedIn page? Before you go to that user group meeting, make sure you got a LinkedIn page, because you can ask people, hey, it was great to meet you. Can I join your LinkedIn? I'll send you a LinkedIn request. And it doesn't have to be, nobody wants to be commit, but LinkedIn's the way we do this in the industry. It's the way we keep track of everybody. It's the way we connect with other people. You may find that you have people on your LinkedIn list that this person knows that you did not know they knew each other. So another example, it's a very small group. It's a very small area in the industry to work through. You're going to be running into the same people over and over and over in your career. And it's great when that happens. Oh, I know you. I met you when you worked at this other place, or when you were here, or when you were there. There's great people I've met and worked with throughout my career that just ran into them. I walked into a meeting and there they were, like, wow, we worked together at the same company doing the same job 5 years ago. We lost track and here you are. Had no idea you worked here. Happens all the time. Let's go to 865. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name is Chris, and I'm actually calling from the East Tennessee area.
Hey, Chris.
I just had a question about kind of maybe what your recommendation on going through the study materials is. I recently got my A+ just watching your videos, and it was enough for the A+, but I feel like the Net Plus, I may need some additional source material. I got a job at a help desk and would really like to get on the NOC team there.
Perfect.
And so I guess my question is, what would be the best way to start going through the material? I know there's different types, the labs, the videos, the reading material and stuff like that. What would be your recommendation going through it?
Well, that's one of the things, and I tell people all the time, and it's in my videos, there are people that watch my videos and they have enough experience, or they've done this long enough, or maybe they're just good enough a student that they watch the videos, then they go take the test and they're done. And I build my videos so that they cover every single one of the exam objectives. But videos teach a particular type of content in a particular way. There is details and information that you can't get across in a video series unless you were making the video series 2 and 3 times longer than it already is. And nobody wants to sit through 60 hours of a video series just to be able to get this. And that's why I mentioned the very first video of every single one of my courses, I tell you, maximize the number of resources you are using. Don't just rely on any one thing, but use multiples of these because they teach in different ways. For instance, earlier we talked about the resource list that's on my site, and it has the 4 things I always recommend people get. Watch some videos. I think videos will teach you content in a way and demonstrate things on the screen and at the command line in ways that a book cannot. So videos are extremely useful to be able to do that. Whether you use my videos or anybody else's, I don't care, but use video because it's a great way to learn. Another thing you should absolutely have, and it's so inexpensive that I'm not sure why everybody doesn't do this, but usually sometimes it's a time issue, sometimes it's a money issue, and I get that, and that's perfectly reasonable. But try to get your hands on a good book. There are inexpensive books that are available electronically in Kindle format and others. Many people have access to a library that has access to some of these books. I know that in many libraries, there is access to technical book libraries as well that have the latest certification books on them. So make sure, I think O'Reilly is a really good example of that many libraries have a subscription to O'Reilly, which gives you access to the entire list of every O'Reilly book they publish, which, by the way, also includes A+, Network+, Security+, and other certifications as well. You may be able to get a book for free, and you had no idea. I list some of those books on my website if you wanted to buy some of those. The third resource I always tell people, now that you've learned it, now you've read the book, you've watched the video, maybe you've got some hands-on or you've gone through some of these, do some Q&A, do some practice exams, see how well you remember it. So I list some Q&A books on my site. My plan is to create Q&A for every single one of my courses. So Network Plus is one of those that's on my list. So Q&A should be a thing you should be looking at as well. The fourth thing should be hands-on. There's something about doing your own trace route, running your own netstat, capturing your own packets with TCP dump, where suddenly you realize, wow, this is interesting. Let me see what I can do with this. And it fires different synapses in your brain, I think, that suddenly the typing on the keyboard and the watching it on the screen is able to teach you in a way that's different than the book. It's a little bit different than the videos. It kind of puts everything together for you. So don't discount that either. Having plenty of hands-on can really, really help you as well. And I think that's one that I think more people should do. It's hard to find good labs, though, and I get that. I put a couple of examples on my website so that people could see some that are available. That's not the be-all, end-all. There's plenty of options for labs, so be sure to go through and find some that work for you. But I put those on my site so that people would get an understanding of where you would go. So you're right. Don't just rely on videos, especially for Network Plus. Network Plus is just all acronyms. It's just a mess if you've never gotten into it before. Once you get into networking, it's so second nature. It just becomes so easy to know what the port numbers are. You know what the acronyms are. You don't even call them by name anymore. You just say, I need something on 443. Can you add that to the firewall? Thanks. Everybody knows what you're talking about. You're talking in OSI models, layers. It just becomes normal. But when you're learning it, what a mountain to have to go through. So combining these resources together, that might help you as well, Chris.
Gotcha. So kind of just maybe go through the videos first, and then as I'm watching the videos, read the books, and then once I feel comfortable on a topic, I can start doing the Q&A and do labs at that point.
Yeah, find the system that works for you. I have some people that will tell me they'll start with the books, they'll read a chapter of a book, and most books, practically every book you find, has a cross-reference in it that says, Chapter 1, I'm pulling this from the CompTIA Exam Objectives 2.2 and 4.2. So then after reading that chapter, they go watch my videos in section 2.2 and 4.2 because I use the same numbering as the exam objective, so it's easy to cross-reference. And then they go and do some Q&A. Maybe they do some tests from the book or some hands-on. So it just depends on what works best for you and what resources click with you the best. And there's no wrong way to do it. Find the way that gets into your brain the easiest so that when you're ready to go through these set of exam objectives, you can check off and know that you know what those topics happen to be.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Best of luck. That's always a challenge whenever you start going through and trying to figure out, how do I lock this in? And what resources do I use? Those are the 4 resources I've constantly recommended. They are the legs of the table. You need the videos, the books, the hands-on, the Q&A. Those are your top 4. Try to focus on that. I think you'll be very, very good shape to be able to work through what the exam is expecting of you. Networking is kind of weird. It kind of fits into that category I think about on the A+ exam, because on the A+ exam, there's a huge section on printers, laser printers, inkjet printers, dot matrix printers, thermal printers. Well, nobody has all of these printers in their home. You might have one of them, maybe. Some people don't have printers in their home. Why would you want one? It's nothing but trouble. So you don't have printers in that scenario. So whenever you get into the situation where you have to learn it, you're learning a topic that you've never seen, you've never touched it, you're not familiar with it at all. You're just sort of taking an explanation that's in a book or from a video. That's kind of weird. Then you get into networking, and it takes that idea. It's not just printers, it's everything. Heck, you don't even see protocols. They're not even real. You can't touch them. So now how am I supposed to understand a model that talks about a technology that I can't see? I get it. I absolutely understand. So be sure as you're going through this that you really do work through all of those pieces. I think that can help you as well as you're going through these and trying to understand where you should go with studying. I think those might help you too as you break down all of those and understand the pieces of it. I think it's probably even more important to use those different resources than just one, because I do think they teach you in a different way. I know when I'm reading a book, there's so much more detail you can read from a book than you would ever get from a video in that same amount of time. And that's why people will talk about my videos saying that I cover exactly what the exam objectives expect of you. I don't go any farther in either direction. I don't give you a little bit less, and I certainly don't give you more. I try to give you exactly the right amount. But for those of you just getting into networking, some of these topics really require some additional fleshing out. It'd be nice if you had more history on that topic. It'd be nice if there was more context on that topic. Well, if I started doing that in my videos, the course would be twice as long, which I don't think is what people are really looking for. And that's why I tell people, make sure you go to other resources. A book is going to give you a little more detail. It's going to flesh out the details of this. The video is going to give you exactly what you need to know. The hands-on is going to give it to you in another way that kind of solidifies it in your brain. And the Q&A is going to tell you if you can get it out of your brain again. So that's the process. It's not any one thing. It's multiples of things. You know, the only thing I don't have that I don't do, people asked this in chat room, is I have not authored A+ Network Plus or Security Plus book. And I don't have any plans to do that. I have authored books in the past. Not my thing. Not interested. Well, we sort of have books. We have our course notes. We have our practice exams that are coming, already have been released for Security Plus and coming from the other certifications. That's about as deep as we're going to get. It's extremely time consuming. It takes a lot to be able to produce those things. I won't say never, but I would say probably almost never expect a book from me. I would much rather point you to some really good books like I do on my website and say, these are good. Try these. Read through these and see if they work for you. And I think that's a better way for me to do it. Otherwise, I'd be spending all my time writing books. I wouldn't have time for videos. There wouldn't be time for live streams. There wouldn't be time for lunch. And nobody wants that. I would rather spend my time doing this kind of thing, and then we'll worry about the details of those other pieces later and figuring out all of that. Other questions from the chat room. Let me circle back for those. So the question was about, then what book would I recommend? And I gave you some examples on my website of books that I recommend. There's plenty of books out there, of course, to be able to choose from. It doesn't have to be the list that's on my site. One of the things I recommend that people do is take advantage of the capabilities on Amazon, because you can read a book without buying it. You can read into the book. You can read the first chapter or so of a book without buying it. Look inside. Click that look inside link, and you can read through a chapter. And from there, you can get a feel for the author's style, for their voice, for how they write, and see if it's a style that works for you. And you can try 4 or 5 or 6 different books that are rated highly on Amazon and see if one works better than another. I ended up doing a couple of, when I first got my A+ certification back in the 600 series, there were 2 books I chose. I chose 2 different books. I read through one book and then I went to the second one. And in the second one, it had a better style for me. I should have started with that one. And I realized there's such a huge difference. It's the same content. It's the same exam objectives. Memory is memory. Hard drives are hard drive. SSD is SSD. But the way someone writes it and presents it can be very, very different, even though the book that fit best for me wasn't the highest rated. But if I was rating it, I would have rated that one the highest. So it really is very personal. It's a very subjective type thing that you have to read it so that you know it's the right book for you, regardless of what anybody else is saying. As long as everybody's saying that's a pretty good book, then you can probably put it in the list of things that you can consider. There's some books out there that are real stinkers. Don't get anywhere near those. And usually the Amazon ratings will steer you clear of the bad ones. There's not really that many bad ones, thankfully. You might find one that's really bad, but the rest are just, they're okay. And but once you have a list, you can go through the top 3 and then decide, of these top 3, which fit best for me. I'll go through all of those to figure it out. Other questions from the chat room. Should we get A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus? Or should we get a combination of these? Should we get one of them, none of them? We don't know. The answer is I don't know, and nobody else knows either, unless we know what job you're interested in. And here's what I would recommend as you're going through this job hunt or trying to figure out, how do I go from what I'm doing now to maybe getting into IT? How do I get in the door with IT? Well, there needs to be a goal. So what is that goal? For most of us getting into IT, including myself, it was a help desk job. My first job in IT was I guess once I got out of school. I worked in computer operations while I was in college, but my first out in the world job was a remote technician. So that was an entry-level job, and there's still very good entry-level jobs in remote technicians today. I have people come to my office replacing motherboards and laptops, and they're a remote technician. They get the motherboard is sent to them. They just show up at my office. They replace it on site, and they're off to the next thing. That's a good entry level. Maybe being a help desk is entry level. It depends on what jobs are available in your area. So you should figure out, what is the next job going to be? Not what is your goal for ultimately what do you want to do in life. You just need to know what the next thing is. And that's going to help you decide what you need to be able to get to the next thing. If it was me looking for this job, I would go out to all the job sites. I would go out to the local company websites. I would go to the dice.coms, the monster.coms, whatever people, the LinkedIn is really what people, LinkedIn and Dice are very popular ones these days. Find all of those sites that are jobs in your area. Go to companies you know in your area that you've seen, like they got a big building. They got to be hiring some people. Let me go to their website. They probably have a career section on their website. See what jobs they are offering. Look for entry-level help desk. Look for a help desk position. Look for a help desk analyst 1 type job. Look for that entry-level job and see if you can find what they are looking for. Some employers want you to have a lot of things on your resume. They want a formal degree. They want a certain certification or 2. They have a list of these. Well, make a spreadsheet. This job at this company wants these particular things on my resume. This particular job at this particular company wants none of that. They don't care if you have a formal degree. They didn't ask for any certifications. They're probably going to pay you less. So there is a method to their madness. If you got lower qualifications, you're probably going to be paid less than someone who has more qualifications. That makes sense. But that may be a good job for you to get in, learn for a year or 2, and then go to the next job, which is what we tend to do in this industry, assuming that they won't increase your pay much in that environment. Maybe they will, and you get to stay longer. But now you have a spreadsheet. Now you have an understanding of, in my particular geography, here's what people tend to be looking for. And this varies widely depending on where you are in the country. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, the requirements there are very different than if you're in the Seattle, Washington area. Well, it's Washington in both places. Wouldn't it be the same? Nope, very different, which is very different also if you're in Dallas. So all of those are very, very different. There's a different group of people that live there. There's a different availability of companies that are there. There's a different demand on the people who are working in those places. So make this spreadsheet for your area, and then you'll know what you should be studying. You'll know that you should be working towards an A+, a Network Plus, a Security Plus, or whatever it happens to be. Now, I will temper this because a lot of people say, but I want to work in cybersecurity, whatever that is. I'm not even sure what that is yet. But IT security, I'm certainly familiar with. So let's say you want to get into those jobs. The problem is there's not a lot of entry-level jobs in security. That's usually one where you're working up from a job in networking. You're working up from a job in application development. You're working up from a job in a different area to move into security because you need a broad foundation before you ever get into security. That's not to say there are no entry-level security jobs these days, because there are some. There's certainly some security operations center or SOC jobs that are entry-level, and there are other people I've talked with who've gotten entry-level security jobs, but it's not the same market as an A+ looking for a help desk position. There are many, 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 many more help desk jobs available than entry-level security jobs available. So that's your challenge. If you're working to get into security, you should probably set a different path to be able to optimize or maximize your possibility of getting there quickly. That's what I would, of course, would recommend going into that. So maybe that can give you some perspective. Do you get A+? Do you get Network Plus? Do you get Security Plus? I have no idea. What do the employers want you to have? And that's the answer. That's who you need to find out, because they're the ones that are making that determination. Also, I will tell you, if you read through some of these job postings, they're ridiculous. They're looking for a 4-year degree in some type of astrophysics. They want you to have a CCIE, and they're really hoping that you have some knowledge of how to change time and space. And if you have those qualifications, send them a resume for an entry-level help desk position. So don't be dismayed by this. If it says entry-level help desk and you really feel that your requirements, the things you know, your qualifications really fit entry-level help desk, send it in anyway. So make sure that they get a copy of that, because they're not going to get a resume that has all of those things on there. They're going to take whatever they get and they're going to spread them out and go, all right, which one's the best 3 out of this, so we can call them and have them come in. So that's what I would recommend, to be able to do that. Makes sense for me. Let's go back to the phones. We do have some folks calling in. 773 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm Joseph, calling from Chicago.
Hello, Joseph, again. Good to hear from you. What can we do for you?
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure listening to your videos and talking to you also. Professor, are you familiar with the new bugs that on Windows 10? Recently, they're talking about a serious bug they find on Windows 10.
Yeah, that was a big. It was a big Patch Tuesday yesterday, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Not.
Yes. What was it about? What kind of bug was it?
The ones, I did not read through the exact list yet. I haven't even patched my Windows 10 box today. Sadly, I am sorry to say I have not patched it yet. The thing that I think that's the biggest problem in whenever you run into an operating system bug is the remote code execution. And I think there was one, wasn't there? Let's look at Patch Tuesday. I usually will keep up with the Patch Tuesday because the streaming box that I use here it is up here. That is a Windows 10 box running this. I don't think I have other Windows running here in the studio other than that one to have this there. But I know that there was a cryptography issue. It was the crypto DL, right? So there was a cryptography issue that they needed to close. And it was a big one too. It was like every version of Windows you can think of was susceptible to this particular vulnerability. So that's significant. And this one was, the biggest one, was it a remote code execution? somebody will be able to tell me on here to be able to have this. I'm reading through the security hole. One of the best places to go, by the way, if you ever wanted to break down security, is the Krebs on Security website. Just a fascinating website to find all of those, to be able to have that there. The problem with this one was spoofing a digital signature. And that was the one I mentioned earlier, that I will send you an email with a digital signature saying that you must have watched 1 hour of this. And I send you an email that says the CEU for that digital signature. Imagine if you could change that digital signature and say that you watched 100 hours, and you can make it say whatever you wanted inside of that. This is probably most important for people that have certificates on their web servers. If you want your web server to prove that it's your web server, you have a digital signature. What if anybody could just make their own signature, and now their web server says that it's your web server? There's your biggest problem with this. So that surrounds the biggest problem on this latest Patch Tuesday update. And it's not a situation that anybody who has these servers ever want to find themselves in. What a mess to be able to work through that. So they're really asking everybody, fix it. That's one of the 50 bugs that they had come out yesterday that had to be corrected. It's not often that we get the NSA in the United States telling us, you really better patch your systems. NSA never tells us that. They almost want us to have a hole in there somewhere. Even they say, wow, this is a bad one. Make sure you get these patched.
And so just imagine the big companies which have got about hundreds of users and they have all Windows 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to affect them financially.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
Well, it's one of those things you're always ready for. That's why Microsoft always releases these patches once a month. Back in the day, it used to be that Microsoft would just send us a patch whenever they found something bad going on. And then when they started sending more of them and more of them, and all of our security teams, because these patches have to be tested. You have to make sure they're not going to break the applications that are currently on your systems. You got to make sure they're not going to break the operating system itself. There's so many moving parts inside of Windows. And then finally, you have to deploy them. So there is a lot of work every time Microsoft releases a patch to be able to get that patch deployed. Now, a lot of people have automated this process now, and now that Microsoft only updates this once a month, we are expecting it. We're waiting for these patches to arrive. The moment Microsoft releases them, we download them, we test them in our labs, we make sure they're ready to deploy, and we have an automated deployment system that deploys those out to all of their Windows 10 systems. Does it take time and energy and money to be able to do that? It absolutely does, but it's not unexpected. It's just built into what we do as part of doing business these days, and we already have a process in place to be able to make this happen. So are we scrambling on these really bad problems to make sure we get them deployed quickly? Of course. But are we surprised by it? Not at all. It's a normal part of the normal Patch Tuesday. This one happens to be bad. Next month may not be as bad, but anytime you get a remote code execution, anytime there's a digital signature issue, those types of problems are pretty bad. So we just make sure that those patches get pushed out as quickly as possible.
Yes, Professor. And also, if you restart your Windows PC, how would it affect the router? I mean, then you have to set up a new access from router to your PC, or just going to be automatically, connections come back to life again?
I think for most people that are applying these patches, they get applied to their Windows 10 system, Windows reboots, and everything goes back the way it was before the patches were deployed. This should not affect anybody's access or availability to any resources. All we're really doing is closing holes and security problems that hopefully nobody has run into before this point anyway.
I see. Wonderful. Yes. Okay. Beautiful answer. Professor, thank you very much for your time. That was wonderful. It's always refreshing.
Always a pleasure.
What you say.
Always a pleasure, Joseph. Thanks for calling.
Thank you, sir. You have a lovely day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You too. That's one thing that I think it used to be kind of chaotic when these updates would come out. There was no rhyme or reason to when it would happen. It was always a mystery as to when they would appear. Suddenly it was a surprise. It was on a weekend. It was at night. Suddenly Microsoft says, hurry, hurry, patch, patch. Part of the thing that we realized early on, of course, was that when you announce that a vulnerability exists, suddenly all of the bad guys are trying to now exploit it. If they know there's a problem with crypto DLL and crypt32 DLL, they're going to start accessing that DLL to try to figure it out. You've given just enough information that they can now focus their efforts to try to find it. So what Microsoft realized, if we keep all of this inside and we only release it once a month, that gives everybody a chance to patch. They know it's coming, so it's not chaotic. It's not unexpected. They knew it was coming on Patch Tuesday. It's now Patch Tuesday. We even have a name for it now. It's Patch Tuesday. And that way, when it is released, everybody can go through the normal process of testing. It gets deployed as quickly as possible. And even though the bad guys may be trying to focus in and figure out through this very odd explanation of what the vulnerability is, by the time they've figured it out, we're all patched. So too bad. The real key is just making sure these things are patched as soon as possible. And that's why you'll find in the latest version of Windows, Windows 10, a lot of this is automated. A lot of this you don't even have the choice about anymore. It will push these updates to you. In some cases, even when you've asked it not to, it will still push these updates to you. So you have no control anymore when it comes to these patches, it seems. There's so many different ways. Even after you turn it off, Microsoft may send you a patch that turns it on again so that they can then patch it later. It's one of the most annoying and frustrating parts of Windows 10 is this patching process and controlling it. But to Microsoft's credit, sometimes for the vast majority of users, we don't want to put any control on that for them. We just need to patch it, like this one, a remote code execution that sets everybody up for ransomware. It sets them up to be a bot in a botnet. There's nasty things that can happen at this point. So why not force the update for everybody? It's controversial. It's annoying for people like me that have a perfectly built system that does not want anything to happen to it. And now I've built this system with exactly the drivers I want, with exactly the software I want. And thankfully now nothing will ever change. Wait, it's updating. Now, it just rebooted. So that, to me, that's a frustrating part because now I don't know when this thing reboots and it's a Windows machine that only handles all of my streaming that everybody would ever use to be able to see me. Is that going to work when it reboots? Is it going to introduce a problem with that streaming process? Is it going to cause an audio issue with the stream? I don't know. We don't know. Sometimes they push down graphics updates that completely change everything on my system. That's not Microsoft, but the graphics provider, and you have to turn those off. So there's all kinds of challenges that an enterprise has to go through. Thankfully, Microsoft has automated systems that can help you if you are in charge of an enterprise to be able to manage this process so that you get the patches first, you get to test the patches, and only then you can send it to your Microsoft Update server and have it process those patches for everybody else. Always a challenge. And when these problems come like this one that affects so many different versions of Windows, that's a lot of systems that are going to be patched. It never, ever goes 100% according to plan. There's always going to be systems that don't take the patch. Something goes wrong during the patch process. Something goes wrong during the rebooting process, and the machine breaks. And as I mentioned earlier, it's just part of doing business. We know it's a numbers game. We know there's going to be issues, but now we've planned for it. And we know that if a system doesn't work properly for the patch, you send somebody out with a computer, they swap it out, they bring the old one back, we reimage it, and life is good again. We know what to do at this point. It's not a surprise. And I think that's the part that at least was the good idea behind Patch Tuesday, is it got rid of the uncertainty and it got rid of the chaos associated with patches. Now it's just the normal part of patching. We like it to be boring. We like the process to be something expected. And when there are problems, we've already planned for them and we can address them. When it's chaotic, that's when everything goes wrong and you don't have plans. And nobody likes that in their IT organization. That does cost money and that does cost time and that does hurt the business. We're the ones who are supposed to be making the business better. We're supposed to be helping the business make more money or make it get toward the goal that they are working towards, whatever that happens to be. If you can make that happen, then you're in the right place in IT to have all of those things. Sounds complicated, doesn't it? Thankfully, it is. It is pretty complicated. It's complex. It's difficult. It is challenging. And that's why people in IT get paid good money, to be able to do that. We're not working outside. We don't have to dig holes. Maybe it's not real work. I guess there's something to be said for that. I haven't done a real job in quite some time. I do the real work at home. I dig my post holes at home and not for someone else on the job being paid hourly. But being able to do this with technology, even though it is difficult and even though it is challenging, there is a benefit to that. There's a financial benefit, and I think a personal benefit. I like being able to crack the code. I like being able to figure out how to automate, how to adjust, how to resolve problems when they're happening. If that's something that you like to do, then you're in the right place, because you're going to be doing that constantly throughout your career. If something going wrong is a problem, you might be in a bad business. Things go wrong here all the time. It's expected. And it's not bad. It's just something that you either have to plan for or you have to be ready for. And then you have to adjust to that. When I worked as a systems engineer, I had hundreds and hundreds of customers. And on any given day, a customer might run into a bug related to a piece of code on a product. Well, let's work through that problem. Let's get you in touch with the right people. Let's get the ticket open. Let's go through the process of troubleshooting this. Let's find a way to mitigate it or find what we're going to be able to do to patch it. And then let's get your problem solved. You become more of a project manager in that regard instead of a technician. But in reality, you're sort of facilitator. You're the facilitator of the process of getting it going. Get the right people together, get the love connection between the customer and tech support, get the right solution that makes everybody happy, keep track of it, check in on them the next day, make sure everybody's got what they need, and then you can go to the next one, because it's going to happen. If you start worrying about it, like, oh, any day now someone's going to call with a problem. Yeah, of course they are. None of this is perfect, but we all know it's not perfect. The real key is how you handle these problems when they happen. And the better you are at handling the problem, you'll find the better technician you are. It becomes a sort of a natural, normal part of what you do in your day-to-day. And it seems like the better you are at this, the farther you can go with this technology. Always something fun to do. And it does become fun sometimes. Sometimes people get a little excited when these problems happen. So sometimes you have to be the person who talks them off the ledge and then gets the problem solved. So you're also just someone to bounce problems after. If somebody needs to vent, you can be the person to vent to. You should never take any of that personally. Technology is technology. People are people. Put the technology over there. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people, and that's the important part of all of these things. So I thought we were all working with computers. We're not. The computers have nothing to do with this. This is all people working together. The computers are just there to the side and sort of help with all those other pieces. Well, thank you for joining us on this live stream. I appreciate you being here in the first hour where I got to ask you questions. We'll do another one next month. Come back and have all of those available as well. We'll have more questions. I make new ones up every month. You're never going to see the same thing twice. Thanks for being here for that. And thank you for your second hour, the after show questions. We wouldn't be able to do this without your questions in the chat room and from the calls. Don't forget about the weekly Network Plus question on Twitter and Instagram. Don't forget about our Amazon link at professormesser.com/Amazon. And thank you for watching the videos and joining our live streams too. We love having you here. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully it's something that can help you get that Network Plus certification that helps you get a job or get a better job. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group.